Hi everyone, this is Dan and this is Eyeshield 21, a story by Riichiro Inagaki, art by Yusuke Murata. And this is a manga, and as you can probably tell by looking at this, this is a football manga. Not football as the Europeans, or I guess most of the world likes to say it, this is an American football manga. So this is an interesting little one. I actually read this, I think I read this when I was in high school. Maybe college a little bit? No, I'm pretty certain I read this in high school. And it always blew me away when I first read this book, because what you may not know, and I'm going to open it up right here, is here's the usual. When you open up these mangas, you usually have like some sort of message from the creators, right? Like Oda does this a lot for One Piece. But if you take a look at here, Eyeshield 21 is the hottest gridiron manga to hit the scene. It's a collaborative effort between Riichiro Inagaki and Yusuke Murata. Originally serialized in the Weekly Shonen Jump, it has sold over 5 million copies to date. And this was, let's see, this is first printing. Let me see. This is printed. This is first printing, so yeah, March 2005. So this is back in 2005. It sold 5 million copies. So if you think about it, it's probably sold a lot more than that since then. But thoroughly hilarious in that here we have yet another example of how manga has been so incredibly successful. Essentially, you're talking about a Japanese comic, to put it in, American terms. That has sold more copies in its short existence way back in 2005 than practically anything that has come out in the American comic scene over the last, I think the last decade, honestly. I can't remember anything selling more than 5 million copies, recently. Maybe trade paperbacks. I would think that's the only thing, trade paperbacks of old stuff, really, that has really competed with that, but nothing, certainly new that's come out of the American comic book scene. Anyhow, enough, bashing on American comics. I think people have heard that a million times over and over again. Why am I talking about this book? So this book is fascinating in that it's a manga. So this was published in Japan, created in Japan, meant for the Japanese market, and even based in Japan. But it's completely about American football, a sport that is largely, pretty much, people know of it around the world. Obviously, the Super Bowl is it used to be a big thing. I don't even know if it's a big thing now with the pandemic. But it's one of these sports that is, generally considered to be, a big thing in America and kind of in the rest of the world, right? Certainly not as popular as, say, soccer or football, as the rest of the world calls it, right? But it's amazing to see a manga that not only treats it, quite well, but actually turns the idea of, an American football story in Japan into actually a legitimately effective story. Now, there are some tropes here, here the main character is Senna, and he's a bit of a wimp. This is kind of a trope in, manga. It's kind of it's a very tiring trope too. You do get tired of the wimpy male character in manga. It gets used a lot, but in this case, it's part of the trend. I think a lot of mangaka like the wimpy male character because it allows them to grow the character into not a wimpy character. At least that's the hope. Some manga do it pretty well, and then some manga take forever to do it. But he's got his childhood friend that he grows up with too. They make it to high school, and he ends up getting recruited by the football team. And really, Senna as a character is not super interesting. He's kind of generic shonen, just young kid growing up, learning to kind of believe in himself. Blah 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 blah. A lot of shonen stuff that people have seen over and over again with these Japanese manga. But the side characters, so Hiruma and Kurita, who Hiruma is essentially the quarterback of the football team, and Kurita is the lineman. One of the offensive linemen, or defensive linemen in this case. They barely have enough players to play the game, honestly. Eyeshield 21 is almost worth getting into just for Hiruma, because this character is so freaking hilarious. He's freaking great. So you see right here, he kind of takes advantage of this kid Senna and convinces him to go call his parents to talk about how happy he was for making it into like the high school that he wanted to get into. In Japan, you take examinations or exams to get into the high school you want to get into. Depending on your scores in those set exams, you get into a good high school or a really bad high school. That's kind of a Japanese thing. It's not really something that we in the United States know a whole lot about. Maybe I guess for private schools, right? If you went to a private school or you have family members, maybe that's the closest I would say is equivalent to here in the United States. But anyhow, it's pretty great. So he busts out all these cell phones. He steals his phone number, and then he calls out all of these freaking pizza food delivery places till eventually he figures out his address and doxes him. I was like, what the hell? This is back in the early aughts, so this is like pretty creative writing by the dude here. And by the way, it's important to note the artist here, Yusuke Murata. That name might sound familiar for some of you guys, it might not. He is also the artist for the sort of republished version of One Punch Man, which you might have heard as well. Very well-known anime, originally a webcomic of lower art quality, and then eventually the writer teamed up with Yusuke Murata to create the more high-end premium manga version of One Punch Man, which one day I might go over because it is an excellent manga to go over, especially in comparison to American comics. But this is actually I don't think this is his first foray into into drawing stuff, but this is the one that kind of got him famous and eventually led to him getting a bunch of work with a bunch of other things too. So Yusuke gets hired on to do all kinds of artwork. He's done a lot of artwork for Capcom and others, and here you can see him in his first major successful manga effort in Eyeshield 21. So anyway, he ends up getting tricked into joining the football team, and kind of the joke is he's kind of a wimpy kid, so he just wants to be sort of the team manager, right? Which really it's like equivalent to the NFL version of the general manager or the coach. I don't know if people know about like how American football works, I guess, over here. I'm not going to get too far into it because I have some people who watch this who have literally no idea how American football works. But essentially, he's supposed to only be like an administrative position, but he ends up getting tricked into becoming a running back for the team throughout this manga because he is so freaking fast. And again, Yusuke Murata gets his start here at drawing action and motion in this manga. And you can see the fruits of that labor later on in One Punch Man when he gets to illustrate that one. He's very, very much the almost iconic manga action. Look at the heavy speed lines here. You can see the lettering right here. Actually, I'm kind of interested right here. The lettering here is this is all English lettering, which is very fascinating. I'm wondering. Sorry here. Indulge me a little bit. Touch up in lettering. Okay, so it looks like it was re-lettered. So in the olden days of manga translation, a lot of these manga companies will actually go through the trouble of erasing the Japanese lettering, because the Japanese would make like big lettering and everything for the sound effects and everything, and then actually redrawing it with American lettering. And I do have to say this, I do wish that letters would start looking at the way manga does lettering, because I think, as you can see right here, it translates well. This big lettering, like boom, making the letters like essentially a part of the art, I think is really, really good, and it helps really give comics, manga, whatever, a feel, especially if you're more action oriented or you're more fast paced, like this kind of material is right here, right? So turns out they find out he has a natural talent for running, and so they think of him as being an excellent choice to be a running back. Probably not the bruiser back, this poor kid probably not going to take a full NFL linebacker hit, but for high school probably good enough, right? So they end up going to their first game. It's a lot of manga stuff like build up, character pieces and whatnot. Eventually they get to the actual game, right? And it's very cool in that it actually doesn't, you can tell the author is a bit of a football nerd. But he doesn't actually drop a ton of information to readers on how football actually works. Instead, he's focusing mainly on the characters and the development and the drama, which is excellent storytelling technique. And you really don't learn about how American football works till the end right here, when it's apparent that you need to know how the game is actually played. And he does it very succinctly and very simply, and you kind of slowly find out about the rules. I'm actually not surprised that this book sold so much, because it makes a topic that for a lot of people, especially if you didn't grow up with American football, which, let's face it, a lot of the world doesn't. For us Americans, it's kind of inherent. For those of us who go to high school and college, you kind of get, high school football, college football, the NFL shoved down your throat here in America. But for the rest of the people in the world, it's, I think I remember I had a friend who was British, always thought the game was weird because they were always stopping the game, and every time somebody did something wrong, they were throwing their handkerchiefs out, as he would like to say. Always thought I would retort, but yeah, of course, everything that goes wrong in your football, you throw a card up into the air. At the end of the day, it's sports, right? You have your rules, you have your things. It's kind of like it's another form of human drama and show of skill, right, and competition, and that's kind of what makes sports attractive to pretty much anybody, right? But yeah, no, in terms of a comic book, manga, this is actually thoroughly impressive if you think about it. Just the art quality by Yusuke is fantastic. Obviously, he would go on from this manga to become almost of an illustrative legend in Japan. And the research and the just fundamental storytelling by Riichiro here, especially the research he did into American football and kind of making it work in a Japanese setting, not gonna lie, kind of impressive. For me, looking at this, on one end, I'm kind of like, how come we never had a comic book about football or sports? How come comic books are only, again, nothing against superheroes. I like superheroes, but how come we can't do this here? Why is it that, it's kind of the Japanese kind of figured out a way to do this and make a ton of money off of this in their own country? Whereas where the sport is actually invented, we can't even figure out how to make this sport as it is right now interesting. Oh boy. I don't know what to say, man. But anyway, if you are curious about the sports genre and you happen to be into or interested in American football, check out Eyeshield 21. It's actually legitimately interesting. You will have to learn how to read, backwards, but you do it for a little bit and you'll figure out. It's not a big deal. Anyway, let me show you some art here. Drew this one up real quick. It's actually based off a picture in here. Let's see. Yeah, you can see it right here, right? I think I made him a lot buffer. Again, this is actually way more in line with what the character actually looks like. And then I made this character way buffer when I did this. Also, I think there's some I think I made his head a lot smaller too. Look at the size of his head with respect to his body right here. Not too bad, I kind of like it, and I actually enjoyed, I want to mess with colors more, because there's something about using oddball colors in places that they wouldn't be, that I think is sort of interesting. And for some reason, when I drew the green over here for the Eyeshield, it brought up to mind the use of colors for mood purposes and other things. And lately, I've just been coloring things straight up and just doing shading or whatever it was, right? And I think it's important to remember that you can do more with colors. And I kind of want to experiment a little bit. I'm just not sure how much I should experiment for my own personal stuff, right? But anyhow, that's the review, guys. Let me know what you think. If you like this review, please hit the thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Hit the bell for notifications. If you got any comments on Eyeshield 21 or my art, leave it down below, and I will see you next time.